What happens when shame writes the laws? Hi there, I'm Chris with a K, and welcome back to This Week in Queer History, where we celebrate queer moments and icons that I wish I had known about as a young gay kid growing up in conservative America. So what happens when people writing the laws against LGBTQ lives are secretly gay themselves? Today, we're going to uncover the devastating history of powerful, closeted politicians and leaders whose own internalized homophobia drove them to persecute people just like them. And this isn't a story about scandal or gossip. It's about how shame, fear, and self-denial became weapons, and the real lasting damage that self-hatred inflicted on queer lives and queer progress.
This week in queer history, stories told with love and glee.
So let's start with the system that made all of this possible. In mid-20th century America, homosexuality wasn't just stigmatized, it was classified as immoral, pathological, and dangerous. During the Cold War, those beliefs hardened into policy. The Lavender Scare, which intensified in the early 1950s, treated gay people as national security risks. Thousands of federal employees were interrogated, fired, and blacklisted simply for being suspected as LGBTQ. Careers vanished overnight. Pensions disappeared, and lives were derailed. Sounds a little familiar to now, One of the chief architects of this purge during that time was Roy Cohn. In 1953, as chief counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy, Cohn aggressively pushed the idea that gay men were as dangerous as communists. He framed queerness as vulnerability to blackmail, helping normalize the mass removal of LGBTQ people from government service. And yet, Cohn was deeply involved in elite gay social circles. He maintained relationships with men, traveled with male companions, and was widely known as gay in private. Yet he never expressed remorse. When he died in 1986 from AIDS-related complications, he denied being gay up to the very end. Then there's J. Edgar Hoover, who ran the FBI from 1935 until his death in 1972, nearly a half a century of unchecked power. A huge thank you to the members that you see on screen right now. Your support makes this all possible, and it helps me keep digging through archives and sharing the queer history that inspires us. If you'd like to join them, there's a link up above and in the description down below. And if membership isn't in your budget right now, no worries. Subscribing and hitting the bell helps more than you know. Most of all, thank you for being here. Hoover expanded the surveillance operations that targeted suspected LGBTQ people, compiled dossiers used for blackmail, and reinforced the idea that queerness was deviant and subversive. And all the while, he shared an intimate, lifelong partnership with his deputy, Clyde Tolson. They live together, vacation together, and are buried side by side. History may never offer a signed confession, but the pattern is unmistakable. Hoover enforced terror outward while guarding his own secrets inward. Religious power wasn't immune either. Francis Cardinal Spellman, Archbishop of New York from 1939 to 1967, was one of the most influential Catholic figures in America. He wielded enormous political influence during World War II and the Cold War, and he reinforced church doctrine that condemned homosexuality as sinful. Privately, Spellman was widely rumored to have same-sex relationships and was nicknamed Franny in Broadway circles. Publicly, he supported institutional policies that punished queer people and resisted sexual liberation. His legacy reflects a life split cleanly in two. In the late 20th century, the pattern didn't disappear. It modernized. Terry Dolan, co-founder of the National Conservative Political Action Committee in 1980, built a career attacking what he called the homosexual movement. NCPAC fundraising letters warned donors about militant gays destroying American values. Behind the scenes, Dolan frequented gay bars in Washington, D.C. He died of AIDS-related complications in 1986. His name later sewn into the AIDS memorial quilt. Political strategy played a role too. Arthur J. Finkelstein, one of the most influential Republican campaign consultants of the late 20th century, helped elect candidates who opposed same-sex marriage, employment protections, and LGBTQ inclusion. He quietly lived with his male partner for decades and eventually married him. Finkelstein rarely spoke publicly about queer issues, but his work directly advanced politicians who harmed LGBTQ people through policy. Then there were the lawmakers, whose voting records told one story while their private lives told another. Larry Craig, U.S. Senator from Idaho from 91 to 2009, consistently voted against LGBTQ protections. He opposed hate crime expansion and supported bans on same-sex marriage. In 2007, he was arrested for soliciting sex in a men's restroom at the Minneapolis airport. Even after pleading guilty to disorderly conduct, Craig denied being gay and continued to frame himself as a victim. David Dreyer, a powerful California congressman who chaired the House Rules Committee, voted for the Defense of Marriage Act and against employment protections for LGBTQ people. For years, Washington insiders described his long-term relationship with a male staffer as an open secret. Dreyer never addressed the contradiction publicly. And then there's Jim West, who built a career in Washington state politics opposing gay rights. In the 1990s, he supported legislation that would have banned gay people from teaching or working with children, labeling homosexuality as a deviant behavior. In 2005, while serving as mayor of Spokane, he was recalled from office after evidence surfaced that he had offered favors to young men in exchange for companionship. And this pattern wasn't confined to the United States. In Austria, far-right politician Jörg Haider built his career reeling against social liberalism and voting against lowering the age of consent for gay relationships. After his death in 2008, his closest male aide confirmed their long-term intimate relationship. Haider spent decades performing traditional masculinity while quietly living a different truth. And in Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe turned violent homophobia into state policy. From the 90s onward, he referred to gay people as worse than pigs and dogs, and he oversaw arrests and suppressed any LGBTQ organizing. While claims about Mugabe's own sexuality remain unproven, there were plenty of rumors. But his ferocity illustrates how authoritarian power, it often relies on queer scapegoating to consolidate control and to rally people in fear. Looking at all of these lives together, a pattern emerges. These weren't just closeted people who were trying to navigate hostile environments. They were people who turned their fear into policy, their shame into law, and this silence into systems that hurt millions. And while I was doing all of the research and looking up everything for this episode, there were just moments that I had to stop and sit there. And it wasn't because the history all surprised me. I already knew a lot of these laws and the purges and the policies that were enacted, but because I just kept thinking how sad this was, how deeply tragic it was for these people. It's not a story about all of the harm done to millions of LGBTQ people. It's a story about these people who never got to live their own lives truly, who lived in the shadows, who lived in fear, who lived so suppressed that they had to suppress others. And I kept thinking of their daily performances, the energy that it had to have taken to appear straight, the constant vigilance, that careful calibration of every word, every gesture, every relationship that they had, living inside rooms filled with people who would have despised them if they had known the truth. That kind of existence, it's exhausting and it's so isolating. No amount of power can make that loneliness go away. And what I found so interesting when I looked at it is that even though they bowed to their shame, it never saved them. And even being exposed didn't save them. Some of them were caught and they were arrested or outed. Plenty of people whispered about them, but even then they denied it. And I don't know if it was because they were so committed to the lies at that point, or they just couldn't admit the truth, or realizing that if one thing that they said, the truth that came out, it would just crumble like a house of cards. Their belief systems, their identities, the community that they were in that hated who they were. Truly, it's fascinating. And I kept wondering what could have helped them, what could have led them out of all of these lies and this world that they had built based on shame and fear. And I don't know, at that point, that far in their lives, I don't know if anything would have. I mean, the shame kept them hidden, so there's no more amount of shame that could have turned it around. The fear was constant. They were surrounded by people who were probably saying all of the worst things and reinforcing the fear. So at that point, I think it was too late. But maybe there was a point earlier on that if they had felt safety or community in a different light, away from the fear, away from the shame, maybe they would have been able to imagine a life that they could have lived differently. I don't know. And looking at all these lives, I do not want to live like that. I do not want to shrink back. I don't want to soften or lie so that I can be around the people who don't understand me. I've learned with time, it's slowly and imperfectly, that when you dampen yourself to survive, it doesn't just hurt you. And yes, it hurts you badly because you're not living in your truth and you're not experiencing the life that you can live, but it ripples outward and it affects others. It becomes silence, it becomes complicity, it becomes harm. So if there's anything that I take away from this history of these people, it's that honesty isn't only personal, it's communal. Living openly isn't about bravery points, it's about refusing to let fear become a weapon. And I want to choose a life where I get to be whole, and I hope we keep building a world where choosing yourself doesn't cost everything. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I know it's a little heavy, but it definitely deserves a little bit of reflection. And if you want some uplifting queer history, you can check out this video popping up right over here or visit myqueerbirthday.com, where you can find other queer icons and events that happened on your birthday. Link is down in the description below. Until next time, stay strong, stay bold, and keep making history.